Textual Builder Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
In that 1 3/4. So
well,
now I'm not sure.
If it's MDF, it's going to be an MDF type of core. It's just a residential door. But when it comes to a raised barrel hinge, there's only one reason that you would use it, and Bommer is showing it to us here, even though it's a little hard to see. So let's do it this way. You have a frame, and let's say it's single rabbet. That's the rabbet. Now you could also have double rabbet, just like typical hollow metal. This is the rabbet, this guy right here. So when you have an instance where your door has a inset is the face of the door to the face of the jamb. A standard hinge is going to look like this. The problem is this part of the barrel is going to bottom into the jamb. That's not going to work. So what Bommer does really well is they show you this is the jamb because you have a great inset. Face of the door to the face of the jamb. Let's say that that's 1 3/8. That's no good with a standard hinge because this curvature of the barrel is going to be the jamb is literally going to prevent it from being installed because the barrel has to sit out here. It has to stand proud of the face of the jamb. So raised barrel is used when you have a tremendous inset or a great inset. A standard situation is going to look, this is just single rabbet because it's common in wood. This is a typical situation where the door is inset slightly because the barrel of the hinge is going to sit out here. It's going to sit here. It doesn't have to sit in here. So let's draw that like this. Okay, typical hollow metal frame. There's your door. Okay, swings this way. Your hinge is going to sit out here. That's your pivot point. Your knuckle is here. Your hinge leafs are here. No problem. But if you were to, in very common in residential, if you were to add jamb extensions or thick casing that's not held back, casing would normally be held back like this. That's what your casing would look like. In your home, when you look at the casing on the pre-hung to the bathroom, let's say, or the bedroom, the casing's held back. That's to fit the knuckle of the hinge in there. There are times when that's not the case. It's run up tight like this, like brick mold could be, or jamb extensions. Jamb extensions in residential are used because you got a wall that's X thick. Well, the pre-hung guy sends out a frame that's too small. This is all unfinished masonry or whatever it is. So when you have a 7-inch wall and they send out a 4 9/16 jamb, bingo, problem. Because you can't take all of this and flush it to out here because then you have a problem on the inside. So sometimes what they'll do is add jamb extensions to fix a mistake. That's going to require a raised barrel hinge to throw that knuckle off, just like you see here. So if the guy's got raised, if he's saying raised barrel, you could ask him, well, tell me why you need raised barrel, and get into the weeds on it, or you can just quote him raised barrel. But that's why raised barrel is used. And in the Stanley catalog, there are going to be different applications of raised barrel, and it all boils down to the swag line, the gap between the two hinges, and how they're bent. Because you have... If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. A 1/16 of an inch gap between these two hinge leaves here on a square edge door. Well, the problem is if you have a beveled edge door, it's not going to work as well because that bend here, this angle if I measured this, if I drew it and measured it in AutoCAD, is different than this angle because the edge of the door has a different angle.
Right.
This is 90 degree from this line, and this is 87 degree from this line. So you would certainly have to know beveled or square edge. But then there are all these other things that we get into doing when it comes to these weird raised barrel hinges, in the sense of we'll do a double mortise, where you can have an application where what the guy's doing is he has a steel channel. This is just steel tube. And they can't mortise steel tube because this is 1/4 inch thick. And what they'll do is they're going to hang a hollow metal door into it. Well, you've got a hinge leaf here. They can only surface mount it. You got another hinge leaf here. Okay. Then you got your barrel here of your hinge. So what we'll end up doing is doing a double mortise on the door like this, so that the hinge pocket, it's not 134 thousandths deep, it's 134 thousandths for the leaf, times 2 plus the gap, well, whatever it is, whatever minus whatever margin you want here. So a double mortise is kind of cool.
Right.
Well, I had one customer in Chicago that did it all the time on wood doors. But you can do it on a standard hinge or on a raised barrel hinge. Doesn't really matter because they're going to bend those leaves. It's just an extra set of bends. But that's why the guy's saying I need raised barrel. He just didn't tell you why. And if he did, you know, you would hear his words, but you may not understand the exact context just yet. Well, now you know a lot more about the context than you did when you initially talked to him. It's because of a conflict between the rabbet of the frame, RABBET, and the knuckle of the hinge. A standard, you know, imagine if that frame, here's the frame line, imagine if that ran out to here. You can see very clearly what the problem is. You won't get this leaf installed because the frame is here.
Right.
So in order to compensate for that, you kick the barrel out, just like this.
Okay. You know, when he said offset hinge, you know, I, in my head, immediately pictured an offset pivot where you're trying to get some additional clearance. So that was kind of what I pictured when he said that, and then just kind of took him for his word. But now I know, ask why. Why are we doing that application? You know, what are we accomplishing?
The word offset's probably used incorrectly and out of in context, but incorrectly. Offset is the dimension from the face of the door to the center line of the vertical axis of pivoting. That's where you're coming up with a pivot, because pivots are either offset or center hung. Offset, the word offset is a trigger word. It doesn't apply to raised barrel because these are not offset. It's just a raised barrel hinge. They're offset, but there's no fixed dimension on this being 3/4 inch. It could be, it's going to be 3/4 inch or really close to it. But if you looked at the template of an offset pivot, you're always going to get 3/4 inch offset unless it's 1.5 inch offset. So, you know, what I would do in this case is I would send him, once you send him the quote, send him the template. Hey, you said offset and you also said raised barrel. And then, you know, look at the attached template. This is what I've planned on. But this is how you learn.
Right. And that's why I'm talking to you about. I actually tried, you know, when he was on the phone, and I couldn't find even the right catalog to look through. So, but this is how we do it. We just got to figure it out. So, you know, I learn each time I do it. So, you know, this is the right process, is to ask, and, you know, my coworkers and learn each time instead of, you know, handling it.
Now, calling Bommer's tech support is going to be non-existent. Calling Stanley's is going to be tough, because all that stuff is made in China, and they've got people in the United States. But if there's a, you know, and whether it be Stanley or whomever you like, Hager's really good with tech support. They got a guy over there, Mark Carmody. Mark's been there for decades. He's forgotten more about hinges than people have ever learned. He's like Stuart Jackson from Bomber. These are engineers, these guys. They know the business. I have also been getting responses from Stuart Jackson. He's in the vendor profile for Bomber. You can email him a technical question. He's really, really great. I've met him. I visited with him. He's shown me the operation. We had a bunch of laughs together. Some good backslapping laughs. Good. What a genius. When he's gone in terms of retirement permanently, the lumen rating of the hardware industry will dim, will go down.
Interesting. Interesting. So since we're talking about Bomber, um, what is your input on Bomber? Or are they actually operating still? I mean, I've heard almost 2 years ago they were closing down shop, and now you're telling me people are still working in tech support sometimes. So I'm like, are they still manufacturing stuff? Or are they just selling off their old stock?
Bomber is still a company. They are still a company that operates. However, they've discontinued all builders hardware. So I have emailed in the last 2 years, and just as recently as maybe 2 months ago, Stuart Jackson, who was their engineer, and he still answers. Emails are still getting to him, but I know his emails are also being read by other people at Bomber, and I know that because I asked some information that some might consider proprietary information. What machine do you use to make this? And he answered me completely. It's not a secret. If I was a machinist, I wouldn't even ask the guy. I would just know how it's done. And then someone higher up in Bomber saw their way into the conversation, which is all good. Doesn't really matter. I said, well, I said, you still have the machinery. You can still buy steel. Send me a quote for 100 of these. Let's do one more for old time's sake. And they refused to do it. They're door bumpers. Anyway. But he, as of a couple of months ago, he was still responding. And, the guy's working now for some motor manufacturer out of Germany. But I'm sure his first love would be Hinges, because he worked at Bomber for decades. You'll see his name. In fact, let's just take that a step further. 7811-600. Okay, that should have worked. Template.
There it is, Jackson.
Yep. Stuart Jackson. The man, the myth, the legend. I've offered to come to his house and record him and do an interview so we can write a chapter of the history of how Hinges, what A to Z, what are Hinges. Let's go through all of it. I just, it never came to pass. A guy like him doesn't see his own brilliance because he's just Stuart Jackson.
Right. Interesting.
To him, he's just Stu.
Right.
But to me, he's Mr. Jackson.
Very good. Okay. Let's see here.
So on that thing that you're working on, are there any other gotchas?
Like other stipulations he called out?
Well,
so he actually specified that he thought these were going to be handed. Like he actually gave me the hand of the doors.
Well, raised barrel hinges can be flipped end for end, but you want to specify the hand, and the reason is I want to do this right. Oh, okay, here's a decent enough picture. See that little hole there?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the pin. This pin goes all the way down into about here. That's a button tip. That's what they call that tip. There are different tips. This is a button tip. It looks like the button on your coat. Now, a raised barrel hinge, because it's asymmetrical, from one right side view versus left side view, if you have all left-hand doors, you're good. But if you have a right-hand door, now this little hole is at the top, you can drive that out. You can drive out this pin and then pull that button tip off and flip it all over. But do you want your customer doing that? No. You want the factory doing it. So when you order raised barrel hinges, you're going to tell them, this is the handing that I need. Because you don't want your customer out in the field slamming stuff in a vise.
Right.
So the point of that is when you specify a door closer, what you do is it's surface closer, and I think we talked about this, 4040 XP, immediately, well, probably the arm, so let's say EDA, and then immediately size whatever, size 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, size 4. You specify the size so that the factory is setting the spring the spring rate, so that your guy's not out in the field doing it. You're doing all of the setup at the factory as possible, because they're manufacturing the stuff. They don't care if they set it to a left hand or a right hand. They're doing it anyway. So you always inform the factory of exactly what it is. Leave nothing to be done in the field, because it might be the painter who's installing finished hardware. It may not be someone who's actually an expert.
Right. Okay. Very good. I think I want to jump into it and see if I can figure out the rest, since I know what catalog to go in, and I want to try and look at the chart and see how many they need and just do all that on my own.
Yep.
So I'm going to try to do that right now.
Awesome. Call me if you need anything.
Awesome. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Thanks, Rich.
Bye.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.